good, very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening. Welcome to Enough Rope. My first guest once had an album, a double album at that, in the Australian charts for 239 consecutive weeks. By the end of that run, you could find it in one of every 3 households in the country. An international super-duper star, he sold more than 115 million albums in his career and had about as many top 40 hits as the top 40 has room for. Far from resting on his laurels at 62, he's still out on the road, slaying them in the aisles, bringing his own brand of crunchy granola-based entertainment to the faithful around the globe. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Neil Diamond.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Neil, welcome. Lovely to have you here. I want to go back to the start of your songwriting career. You were studying at uni, you dropped out of an organic chemistry course, go figure, and you decided to become a songwriter for hire. What sort of songs were you expected to write?
Well, basically whatever was popular at the time. You know, in those days, you weren't really allowed to go off and do your own thing or write songs from your own life. You were supposed to be a professional and write something that would be suitable for the artist of the moment. And I wasn't very good at it, and I tried it for years, and there's an art to it. But fortunately, I was rescued by the Beatles and Bob Dylan. They had a tremendous amount of commercial success, and that opened the door for me. After 8 years of dismal failure, but a lot of fun, but dismal failure, trying to write music for artists of the time, I was finally ushered into a time that was right for me. It was my time. It was a time that I could sing and perform my own music about what my life was about. And so it was the right time and the right thing to be happening for me, and it all opened up from there.
It took a number of years for you, once you'd made the decision to be a performer as well, to actually get a chart hit. And you had to play gigs in all sorts of places. What are some of the more memorable ones?
Bowling alleys and roller rinks, you know, where kids go roller skating. Yeah, I played that. And as a matter of fact, in that particular roller rink that I played, it was surrounded by a gang. And there was a gang war outside, and they locked the place up, so none of the kids in the audience could get out, and the bands, including myself on stage in this roller rink, had to continue playing just to, you know, keep everybody quiet and distracted. But some of those dates, those early dates, were very memorable.
It's certainly a reverse on the usual. The actual rock bands inside really looking askance at the behaviour of the kids on the streets outside. It should be the other way around. Let's talk about the black art of songwriting, because it works in different ways, and you've had so many top 40 hits. A song like Beautiful Noise, you've said that came to you instantly, is that right?
That actually did come instantly. I was with my kids, we were staying, my daughters were young, and they were staying with me at a hotel in New York, and we were doing all the kind of dad-children things, coloring books and just having fun. And this hotel was on Fifth Avenue, and in front of the hotel was a big parade that was happening at that moment. It's called the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which is an island in the Caribbean. Matter of fact, Puerto Rico just beat the United States in basketball today, and it was big hubbub about that. But this is Puerto Rican Day Parade, and the music was exquisite. It was fantastic Latin music and dancing and drums and steel drums. And my daughter, Marjorie, just perked up her ears and said, "Daddy, what a beautiful noise." And my songwriter's mind immediately went into gear, and I said, "Marjorie, that's a song. I'm going to write it tonight. When Grandma and Grandpa come, I'm going to write it tonight, and we're going to have a song." "All right, Daddy," you know, and then back to the coloring. And we did. We wrote it that night. I put a little tape recorder on, and my mom and dad were there, and Marjorie and my daughter Ellen were there, and we all sang it together, and the song just fell out of me. It was a beautiful title, and there the song came. They don't always happen like that.
No, they do
or
not.
If they do start like that, it can take quite a bit of work and hard work to find out what the song is and what it's about, and you know, flush it out in a sense. That is what I'm doing now, right now, today, yesterday, this morning, waking up, you know, singing a song that I started writing yesterday, working on 2 lines that have been bothering me and making me crazy because they're not exactly right and they don't say what I want them to say. And waking up with that song in my mind and writing those 2 lines down and then going back to sleep.
Is there a sort of madness to it? I have this image of you as, you know, you might be at a meal and you're miles away just thinking of these 2 lines rather than actually perhaps talking with the people who are talking to you.
You know, during this time, when I'm in a writing period, that's exactly what happens. Matter of fact, you may think that I'm talking to you right now, Andrew. But no, I have no idea what we're saying. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. We actually are, we're communicating.
I know Elvis covered Sweet Caroline on stage. Did you ever get the chance to see him perform it?
I never saw Elvis perform Sweet Caroline, although I did see him perform in Vegas. I went down there and he was performing live. I'd never seen him before, and you know, he was Elvis Presley, and I was awed. He was an amazing live performer. He was electric, and he was wonderful. And halfway through his show, he introduced me. I was in the audience, and he introduced me. And you know, it's like worshiping a god, and that god is saying, "Oh, stand up! I like this person in the world. Why don't you meet him?" And my God, and you know, so I stood up, and then the audience started to cheer, and they started to say, "Get up on stage and, you know, sing together." You know, no, I couldn't possibly. And he saw I was uncomfortable. Then he said, "Well, he's on holiday now, so leave him alone. Let him enjoy the show." And they did.
Does a part of you regret that you didn't take that opportunity to hop up and sing with Elvis?
You know, I've thought about it over the years of what would I do, what songs would we do, and it's not a good idea to come up and sing with another performer when it's their show and it's their band. I do know that, and I'm glad I didn't, because I don't think it would have been a good idea to touch that, you know, the hem of the god. He was amazing. He was warm and very generous to me, and I think it's best left at that.
You've actually said that in some ways the audience has replaced your mother. What do you mean by that?
I think in the sense of approval. You know, I think you always want approval from your mom and maybe your dad, the people around you that are closest. I know when I first started to write, you know, who did I play the songs for? First, for my mom and dad. And of course I wanted their approval, and then maybe to a girlfriend, and then maybe, you know, the circle becomes larger and larger. So in that sense, the audience over the years has replaced my mother in regard to providing that approval that is so necessary for any performer, I think any creative artist needs to have their work approved of. I mean, as much as you like to think that you don't care what people think, you're going to create and you're going to imagine these wonderful things, and it doesn't matter what an audience or a patron feels. I don't think that that's really true. I think that every creative artist needs encouragement, needs approval. It's a lonely, difficult business. And if I didn't have the thought in my mind that somebody's going to love what I'm doing right now in the quiet of this room where I've worked for months and months and months to create something beautiful, if somebody's not going to approve of that and love that, there's no reason for me to do it.
You've admitted to having been scared for most of your career. Scared of what?
Well, I suppose there's always an underlying fear. Again, you go back to I think at the heart of every successful person, especially if you're not born with a silver spoon in your mouth, if you're born poor and grow up on top of a butcher store in Brooklyn, that's what creates you. That's what shapes you. Those early experiences in your life, and it doesn't matter that the world, pays tribute to you or loves you or loves what you do later on. Still, underneath that, you're that frightened person that's wondering what exactly is going on here, and should this be happening? And certainly, do I deserve any of this? Of course not. This is silly. So underneath that is that frightened person. Every great performer, I don't care how confident they seem, how oblivious to all of the wonderful accolades they receive. The greatest actors, Nicole Kidman is a frightened child when she comes home from that studio, and so is Russell Crowe. He plays the gladiator, but he's not the gladiator. He's just a frightened kid, and he really just wanted to play in a rock and roll band, and gee, how did this all happen? You must see them as human beings, because they are, and for the most part, they are frightened, and, I'm exactly the same.
That's a really fabulous thing to say. I know that after Hot August Night, you stopped touring for a couple of years, you went home, you wrote, you recorded, and you got into some therapy, and you've tried various things over the years, Freud, Krishna, I believe even a time efficiency person came into your house for a while to teach you and your family how to use time more effectively. I get the sense that life doesn't always come naturally to you. Would that be a fair call?
Well, I'm not sure that it's life doesn't come natural, but this life maybe doesn't come naturally. Being in the public eye is strange, because for the most part, people are allowed to live their lives and make their mistakes. But a public personality has to make those mistakes in front of everybody. Do a stupid thing, and we've all done stupid things. Well, you have to do it in front of millions of people, and if it's strange and weird and they get a good picture, in front of hundreds of millions of people. And if they get a video, maybe it's in front of billions of people. So it is a very strange kind of a life to live, and you have to kind of figure it out. And how do you maintain your own sanity through this? And it is why so many, so many performers reach for spiritual help. They reach for therapy. They reach for all kinds of understandings to somehow get to understand how they deal with this beast that they've been handed and still survive as a human being. This is what they may have wished for a lifetime or dreamed of, but how to live with it, that's an entirely different can of worms. And that's why Madonna is studying Jewish mysticism. She's trying to figure out, how do I survive as a human being in this life that has been thrust upon me?
You've toured extensively, and you stated openly that this cost you two families, which is a very high price to pay. Is that worth it?
It's worth it in this sense. I have 4 kids. They're grown up now. They love me like crazy. I love them like crazy. I've been able to maintain a very close and loving relationship with those kids despite my crazy life, despite all the traveling and sometimes the way I'm treated, which is, it's not real. I've been able to keep my kids. So, yes, I have lost 2 marriages in the process of getting through this life. But it's something that I had to do. This is work that I had to do. It was built into my genetic code. but I have maintained my relationship and my closeness with my kids, and that's the main thing. And I still have a relationship with someone I love. When I was in Australia in 1996, I met a young lady and I fell in love with her, and we've been together now for 8 years, and I adore her. She allows me to live my life. She's an extraordinary woman, and so there, I'm not alone. I gave up 2 marriages, but I was still able to find somebody I love and who loves me. And, you know, so thank you, Australia. I love you. Thank you, Brisbane, for giving me
now, has Rachel taught you any good Australian expressions, Neil?
Oh, you know, I'm constantly being indoctrinated with Australian sports, expressions, the favorite places, the favorite cities and towns, which he wants to take me to and will take me to. I have to watch Australian rules football anytime it's on television, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning here in the States, and I'm starting to know the game now a little bit, which is scary.
Speaking of Australia, when Pat Rafter was going through a form slump, you rang him up out of the blue, is that right?
Yeah, I kind of did. Pat knew Rachel from school days. I think she was maybe one of his tutors in English. She's a couple of years older than he is, and so she knew him, and she knew his family as well. It's an extraordinary story, that family. Wonderful, great people. And so Ray was on the phone with, I think, Louise Rafter, Pat's sister, and I think maybe Pat was there, and so Ray said hello, and I said, do you mind if I say hi? And we chatted for a bit, and you know, he told me he was thinking of retiring for a while, and I kind of shared my experiences. I told him that in 1972 I stopped performing for about 4 years, and it was wonderful for me. It reinvigorated my work and allowed me to live a family life for a short while, because I'd been traveling so much, and his life was very much like that. And I think maybe he gained some insight or strength from that. It's a little different with an athlete. You know, there's a very limited time. The clock is always ticking for an athlete, and so you can't really step out for 4 years and come back in the way that a singer can do.
Just going back to Ray for a minute, I know that when you met her, I believe she was selling the merchandise on your last tour of Australia, and there you were, the boss, yeah. Neil Diamond, the star. There she is selling your merchandise. On the surface, that's a fairly unequal relationship. I'd imagine that's a bit of a tricky balancing act for you.
Well, you know, it was a tricky balancing act, because Ray and I met, and she was introduced by Paul Dainty, who is our promoter and who will be promoting this upcoming tour. And he said, I want you to meet with the woman who's in charge of all the merchandising. She's designed all this and put all this together, and I'd like you to meet with her and let her know what you think of these designs. And she brought a whole selection of T-shirts and hats, various things that she had designed and was prepared to produce. And I started to, as I usually do with merchandising people, give my comments. Gee, I like that hat, or I don't like the design on it, or I don't care for the way that hat is cut. And well, and usually when I do this with people, they'll say, okay, Mr. Diamond, okay, yeah, we'll change that and we'll give you new. Well, she was tough. She didn't like any of my ideas, and she let me know right up front that I had some bad ideas, and her ideas would be the ones that prevailed, and if I thought anything different, well, I just better think again, because that's just the way it was. And I did not like her at all. I did not expect this. I thought, this is a bit hard-nosed. I'm not used to this kind of treatment. And so she set the record pretty straight with me right from the get-go. She was going to be the boss, at least in as far as the merchandising was concerned, and that's just the way it was. And I accepted. I said, well, okay, gee, Nobody's really ever talked to me like that, but if you're right, you're right. Let's see what happens. And I did not like that. I did not like her, and it took a while for me to warm up to her. But when I did, I just fell in love with her. She's an extraordinary woman.
Neil, as I said in the introduction, you've sold more than 115 million albums. You've had almost 40 top 40 hits, yet you're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Why is that?
I don't know. I've thought about that. I don't know. Maybe they consider me a balladeer. Maybe my life and my lifestyle have not been reflective of what rock and rollers are supposed to do or be. I always thought I was a rock and roll person. I was always treated like a rock and roll person, especially by the pop people of my time and the previous generations. But maybe I'm not. I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that, and it's really not too relevant. I'm doing what I want to do in the most glorious of ways. There was no consideration early in my life about, gee, someday I'll be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because there was no Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, until I'd been successful for 15 or 20 years. So it's not on my radar. If they want me in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, great, I'll show up. And if they don't want me, guess what? I'm going to be in Australia this March if you want to see me, and I'm going to still be putting my guts on the line and having a great time. So you be there or you be square.
I reckon you're going to be the first one in the Rock and Roll Bowling Alley of Fame.
I'll take it. I love it.
In some people's minds, I think it's fair to say that for whatever reason, you've never been quite cool. You must have wondered about why that is.
Yeah, I think I'm terrifically cool. I've got a good grasp on life, and I think that's the heart of it. I don't have to pretend that I'm somebody else. I don't have to pretend to be bigger than I am, or smaller than, or different, or scruffier, or this is what I am, basically. And so I think that's pretty cool. But there are a lot of people out there, and they're all going to form their own opinions, and God bless them. Maybe they're right and maybe I'm wrong, but that's just the way it is. I'm going to run my life by what I think is right, and let the pieces fall where they may.
You mentioned growing up above a butcher shop in Brooklyn. What is your lifestyle like now compared to that?
Well, when I was living above the butcher's shop with my brother and my parents, we had a lot of mice in the house, because anybody who lives near a butcher shop knows that there are always a lot of mice around. We had mice in our apartment because we were just 2 floors above it, and I don't know how they got up there, but we had the mouse traps flipping off all night and all day, and I was always scared to get down on the floor at night if my parents weren't home, because there was always a mouse scampering around in my house. And so one of the big differences between then and now is that I hardly see any mice in Beverly Hills.
Well, Neil, if I can get all lyrical with you for a second, may the mice of fate never trample on the floor of your life. Thank you for being with us today. Neil Diamond, ladies and gentlemen, for having me.